Okay, we're going to go through a lesson on fractions now, 7th graders. Lesson 4.4 is all about fractions. And we're going to talk about what fractions are, and how to put fractions in simplest form, and what equivalent fractions are. Okay? So let's start with a fraction. A fraction is a ratio where you have a number, a whole number, and it has to be a whole number, is written over another number, where the bottom number, called the denominator, cannot be 0. Okay? So any number can be written as a fraction. Any whole number also can be written as a fraction. As long as, and you can write fractions so that b cannot be 0. All right, you can't write a fraction with 0 in the denominator. It has to be at least 1. Okay. Now there's different kinds of fractions. One is called a ratio, where the two numbers are about different things. So for example, the number of boys in class versus the number of girls in class. That can be written as a ratio, comparing those two numbers. Okay? And we could say that the ratio of boys to girls in class are 10 to 8. If there's 10 boys and 8 girls. And then you can reduce that to 4 to 5. And you can write it as 4 to 5, or you can write it as 4 with a colon 5. 4 to 5, like that. That's the ratio of boys to girls. So, that would mean that there are 5 boys out of how many total students in 7th grade? 5 out of how many? 18, right? Because 8 plus 10 is 18. So we could write that as a fraction. We could change it into a fraction where the amount is written out of the total by adding these two numbers and then writing that as the denominator. Okay, and that's a different kind of fraction. That's a fraction of the amount out of the total. Yes?
So then wouldn't it be like 1 and 2/8?
No, it would be 5 to 4. And you can leave ratios and fractions written this way. You can leave them top-heavy. There's nothing wrong with a fraction that's top-heavy. It just depends on how it's being used. Okay? So, ratios are written so that they can be written so that you're comparing two different numbers or two different subjects, or they can be written as a number out of the total. Like your score on an assignment can be written as a fraction. If you got 0, 8 out of 18 correct, or 10 out of 18 correct. Okay? It's the number out of the total. Now, equivalent fractions. What does equivalent mean?
It means the same
It means the
amount.
same
It means the same amount, but different size pieces. Okay? So we can find equal fractions or equivalent fractions by simply multiplying the two numbers by the same number. If you're starting with 3/4 and you multiply both numbers by 2, you get 6/8. You have the same amount, they're just in smaller pieces. Okay? Yes?
So is the goal to make the fraction in more chunks or less chunks?
It depends.
Oh.
Sometimes you have to cut up those chunks because you need to take smaller pieces away.
Mm-hmm.
Or add those smaller pieces to other pieces that are the same size. So that's how fractions then are added and subtracted. That's why you have to have a common denominator. The common denominator makes the pieces all the same size. so that you can add and subtract them. Okay? Now, here's another example of creating an equivalent fraction, starting with 4/5. You multiply both by 3, you get 12/15. Okay? Now, with a fraction, when you are expressing it as an answer to a question, you have to write it in simplest form. And so, if you were given 12/15, what you would need to do is work the other way. Instead of leaving it as 12/15, we'd have to put it into the smallest numbers possible. And so, we'd have to use a common factor to reduce it. What's the common factor? 3. So if we divided both by 3, we get 4/5, right? You see how you're working backwards? Now, is 4/5 in simplest form?
No. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And why do you know that? How do you know that 4/5 is in simplest form, Kaden?
4 can't go into 5.
Exactly, 4 can't go into 5, and 4 is made with 2 times 2, right? And 5 is made with 5 times 1. Do they have any common factors? No, they don't have any common factors. And so this we know is in simplest form. If they don't have any common factors, then we know it's in simplest form. Okay? If they do have common factors, then we have to factor those out. We have to take those out of the numbers by dividing. All right? Does that make sense? Okay, so then, what if you have a number that has a variable in it, and we need to put it in simplest form? So, let's start with, let me erase this one. Let's start with like this. Let's do 18x squared over 27x. Okay, now 18 and 27 have common factors. What common factor should we use to reduce it? What can we take out of both 18 and 27?
3.
Yeah, 3. So 18 is made with 3 times 6, and 27 is made with 3 times 9, right? So that takes the 3's out. We can divide them both by 3. But we would be left with 6 and 9, right? So those have common factors. So just watch what I'm doing here. 18 is 3 times 3 times 2, isn't it? And 27 is 3 times 3 times 3, isn't it? Yep. And then x squared is x times x, and 1x is just x. Right? So look at the common factors. Hello, look at the common factors. Each of these that they have in common can be crossed out. And what is left? What is left then, Aiden? 2/3 and x. So, I don't know why that eraser is there. Ignore that.
Okay.
It's something wrong with the board. But 2/3 and x is on the top line, isn't it? There's an x left on the top line. And so this is reduced into simplest form. Now, the point here is that when you have the same number over the other number, or if you have the same number on the top line as the bottom line, what do they equal? 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. X divided by x is 1. And so we're just basically taking those factors out, or reducing them to 1, and then multiplying this whole thing. 1 times 1 times 2 times 1 times x is 2x. And 1 times 1 times 3 times 1 is 3. Or, think of it this way. Whenever there's a number over another number, like 3 over 3, you can cancel them out. And they become 1. Okay? 3 over 3 is 1. 3 over 3 is 1. X over x is 1. And so everything that's left is your reduced fraction. Yes?
So you're just always trying to make it less complicated?
Yeah, simplest form, less complicated, less numbers. Reducing it to its smallest possible form. Let's try another one. Look at example 3 on page 197. 3ab squared over 12ac. ab squared over 12ac. Now, if we wrote this out in expanded form, this would be 3 times a times b, right?
Yeah.
And if we wrote 12, we know there's a 3 in the 12, so this is 3 times 4 times a times c, right? And so then we can cross out the 3's and cross out the a's, and what is left is b squared over 4c. Or 3 over 12 is the same as 1 over 4, right?
Yeah.
Because 3 goes into 12 4 times, 3 goes into 3 1 time, and then the a's cross out, and you're left with b squared over 4c. Mm-hmm. Yep. So what you have to do is you have to write it out and then look for the common factors and take them out of the fraction. Okay? It's called factoring. Factor out the common factors. Okay? I want you to practice this on page 198 and do 2 to 20 evens again. Okay?